Hi and welcome to my channel. This is going to be my first video in my DCP or my Disney College Program 2025 series. It's crazy. I still haven't come to terms with it. It's insane. I'm very excited. But this first video is going to be about my interview, the process that I went through before my interview, during my interview, and how long it took to get my acceptance after my interview. So I'm going to split this video into sections, and I'm going to put the timestamps for each section in the description just in case there are specific things that you're looking for. Although I do encourage you to watch the whole video because I added in some things that I might not have really thought of beforehand and that I wish had been mentioned in some of the other videos. The first section is my feelings before the interview as well as how I prepped. The second section is how I felt the day of my interview. The third section is going to be how it went and what questions did they ask. And my last section is going to be my personal tips and tricks for you going into your interview. So the first section is how I felt before my interview. I was so excited. Several days before, I wasn't really nervous. I was more just excited. I was ready. I wanted to get it over with. Because, you know, interviews are very nerve-wracking. The plus side of these interviews, though, is that they are a phone interview, not a face-to-face interview. So you have a few less things to think about during your interview. But there are some things that are very specific to doing phone interviews that you'll want to know. I was super excited, a little bit nervous. I even said, I was like, I'm not nervous. I am great at interviews, which, as you will see later, is partially true, but I was physically like I was shaking. The day of my interview, I was shaking. During the interview, shaking. It was just like my excitement and my nervousness and my anxiousness all kind of built up, and I was just like dying. And I have videos of the day of, so you'll see those. But I definitely was freaking out. I was freaking out. How I prepared for this was I did my research. Do your research, people. Before you apply, keep in mind that when you get your offer, you have a week to accept it. And when you do accept it, you have to pay the first half of your fee. Now this year, the first half of my fee was $241 and I was not prepared in the slightest. Shout out to my parents. They covered the first half of my fee and I will be paying the back later when I have the money. But you have to be kind of aware of that, especially if you're paying for your own program or if it's kind of like a bit of a tight thing for paying for your program. I would keep that in mind, that is due when you get your offer. For me, it moved very quickly from when I applied to when I had my interview to when I got accepted. So just kind of keep that in mind. So yes, prep. Go on the website, just search the website, look at all of the different details. One thing I didn't think to look at was dress code and the Disney lookbook because they're specific about hair color and tattoos. I think were some of the ones that I wasn't necessarily surprised about. I just kind of low-key forgot that it was Disney and that would be a thing. You can't have a hair color that isn't naturally occurring, so blue, purple, green, etc. I have my hair dyed red. So I technically would be fine because red is naturally occurring, but I am actually going to dye my hair back before my program just so I don't have to deal with it while I'm there. But that's one thing to consider. Just scrounge the website, look at all the different details, and look at the roles. You're going to want to choose your top 2 or 3 roles. I chose my top 5. I did not end up using all 5, but I chose my top 3. And make sure you read the descriptions really thoroughly and really think about what you want to do. But also when you get in your interview, be open to talking about other roles because it gives you a better chance. And also you could end up liking the role that you thought you wouldn't like. So I just kind of keep an open mind with that. So since this is a phone interview, you have the ability to have a piece of paper in front of you. I've seen people do note cards. I've seen people do a notebook. I did a piece of paper that I tore out of my notebook. And I wrote down a few different things on this. The one thing you probably want to have written down is your top 3 roles, which ones you want to do. And then also any questions that are often asked in interviews that you don't think you can pull out of your brain off the top of your head. It's okay if you have to take a second to answer questions, just be like, hold on, let me think about that and then answer. But I take a really long time to think about things and it takes me a long time to pull things from the back of my brain because sometimes my brain is slow, especially when I'm nervous and anxious. So I wrote down some things, some answers to some questions that I know are common in interviews, as well as Disney interviews. And I wrote the answers to those down, so I kind of just had them in front of me. And really, I didn't have to refer back to these, but I think it was because I wrote them down that they stuck in my brain so well. So write those down. I wrote down my recruiter's name. I'm going to cover her name. I don't want to out her. So I'm covering my recruiter's name, but I've left a spot to write down my recruiter's name. But here I actually wrote down my top 5 roles. I really only used my top 3. And this is honestly, this list right here is different than what I ended up with because I did more research on my roles and then decided that I actually had different top ones. So the next thing, I don't know why I wrote this down because I can pull this from the top of my head, which is why I want to do the program. I wrote down my favorite customer experience, a time I turned someone's frown upside down, and how does this relate to my major? Those are the 3 things I wrote down. I didn't have to answer any of those. None of those questions were really asked to me, at least not specifically, but having those answers there were really helpful because they were similar to ones that I was asked. Okay, let's move into the day of. So I have some clips that I took right before my interview. These were like literally my feelings right before I had gotten home, not very long before I had to do my interview, and I had to quickly make some food. So I was losing it, but I'll insert a clip of how I was right before now. Okay, so I'm making lunch right now, very hurriedly because I have 15 minutes before they can call me. So, shaking, so excited, so nervous. I love how Saturday I was like, I'm not even nervous, I got this. I'm great at interviews. I'm literally shaking. I'm gonna lose it. Anyways, but got a little bit of time. They could call me within the next like 30 minutes. So we shall see. So yeah, I was very nervous. I was freaking out, but I was also very, very excited. It's a little nerve-wracking because they can call you within like a 30-minute period, so you don't really know when they're gonna call you. My interview was set for 3:15, so they could have called me from 3 to 3:30 is the window they could have called me from. So it was a little bit nerve-wracking, not knowing exactly when they were gonna call me. But one thing to remember is to make sure you turn off silence unknown callers. I did that quite a bit before my interview, but remember to do that because you don't want to silence their call. I was extremely nervous, but it went very well. My interview went amazing. It was a lot more relaxed than I expected it to be, although I don't know why I expected it to be not so relaxed because it's Disney and I know that they try really hard to relate to you. We're going to talk about what they asked and what happened during my interview. The first thing they do is get the technicalities out of the way. They're going to ask you if you're recording. They're going to say, I'm not recording you, or you're not recording me. Great. Don't record it. Just don't do it. The next thing they will ask you is if you're in a safe place, you're not driving, etc., etc. Just like kind of the technicality. The next thing I was asked was to just tell them about myself, which I used this as an opportunity to talk about my theater experience and my performing arts experience and my experience with being a mascot handler. I kind of threw that in because one of my top roles that I want is a character attendant, and that is basically a mascot handler. So I kind of threw that in. I used it as an opportunity to talk about things that I think related, as well as just talk about myself. And you can use this also to set yourself apart from other people. Obviously you are you, and you being yourself and talking about yourself is unique to yourself. But like one thing I talked about was that I come from a big family, and that means that we could never afford to go to Disney World. So I've never been to Disney World. So this would be my first time going to Disney World. So that's one thing that I mentioned kind of to set myself apart. One thing that I was a little nervous about talking about, but I did add it in, was the fact that I'm not sure about my major right now. I don't know what I want to do. I'm kind of just floating around between different subjects, and so I wanted to use this as inspiration and an experience. So that's kind of like what I told them. And really, it's hard to put this into sections because it was kind of just like a conversation. She used the conversation to ask specific questions. So my recruiter was great at like keeping the flow good and having and having good conversation while also answering the questions she needed answered. But they do talk about whether you are comfortable with chemicals and cleaning equipment, whether you can clean, and whether you're comfortable handling food. Because a lot of their roles have to do with handling food or cleaning to some extent. They asked me what my absolute favorite job was and what my most challenging job was. And then they asked me one time that I have put safety as a priority in a job. Because safety is their top priority at Disney. So that was something that was brought up. And we also talked about the roles that I wanted. Some people said that they didn't talk very long about the roles. We talked a lot about the roles in my interview. Every interview is different. It could be either way. She asked what my top ones were. We talked about it. We talked about my mascot handling in relation to being a character attendant. And she also brought up that since I was a theater kid, I might also enjoy doing attractions because a lot of the attractions are fully immersive and they have the attractions cast members in costume. So we talked about that as well. That's one thing, like attractions was not really on my radar, but that's one thing that I was talking about where you want to be open to talk about any role and be open to doing any role because you do not get to choose. They take in your preferences and they use that to decide where you're going to be put. You have no choice. And if that absolutely completely freaks you out, then this probably isn't the program for you. But it freaks me out. I'm very much a control freak. I have anxiety, but I'm letting myself let go of that control and letting myself enjoy the experience and have the experience because I think it's worth it. But the last thing that they talked about was living with other people. This is where I was real nervous. This is where I was really, really concerned that I was gonna get dropped because I haven't lived outside of my own home. I haven't lived with anybody but family. I go to a community college, so I haven't lived in a dorm. So that was one thing that I was a little nervous about. And she talked about it. She was like, you have to be able to live with other people. It's people from different cultures, sometimes from different countries. But my way of handling that question was being honest, first of all, but also saying that communication is a priority to me. Conflict resolution is a huge priority to me, and I'm looking forward to meeting people from other places and living with people from other places and getting that experience. So you can take a question that you're nervous about and not so sure about and kind of turn it into a learning experience or turn it into something that you're looking forward to doing, and that can kind of be the buffer for this is maybe a question that makes me a little iffy for the program. So after my interview, how soon did I hear back? So I asked the question. They told me that within 2 weeks I would hear back. So within the time span of 2 weeks, I would know whether I was accepted or not. I personally got it 3 days after my interview. It only took 3 days for me to get mine. I know some people get it within 3 days. Some people get it within 2 weeks. I've heard people get it within like 3 weeks. I think it also kind of depends on when you apply and when your interview is, because I applied and had my interview later, I feel like. Mine was March 24th, so it was kind of on the later end, I feel like. So I guess they had less time to tell me if I was accepted, but I got accepted within 3 days. And now we're going to get into the tips and tricks. My personal tips and tricks. I already talked about this a little bit, but do your research. Go over everything, write down what you think you might need to write down. The next thing is if you're an anxious person or you're super nervous, take some deep breaths before you go into your interview. Really just kind of like try and relax yourself. It's going to be nerve-wracking. It's going to be just scary because it's an interview. But go into it with confidence, and if you need to, take some deep breaths, have something to fidget with to help with your anxiety. The next piece of advice I have for you is to sell yourself. It is an interview. That is what interviews are, which is selling yourself to an employer. So sell yourself. Don't be afraid to talk about yourself. Don't be afraid to talk about the things that you can do. Don't be afraid to hype yourself up. because that's what an interview is. Being honest about where you don't have strong suits is typically looked at favorably by a recruiter, but definitely sell yourself, because that's what an interview is. The next piece of advice is about the fact that it is a phone interview, so they can't see you, obviously. But since they can't see you, it is important to verbally show that you're listening, because that's also important. Your interest is really important. Even if it's just like grunting and be like, yeah, oh, okay. Or, oh yeah, I totally agree. Little things like that are things that you can use to show that you're listening, show that you're affirming what they're saying, or even just, yeah, interject with little things just so they know that you're attentive, but also don't interrupt your recruiter. That was something I have problems with. I definitely talked a lot because I was anxious, and I feel like I talked over her a little bit. It ended up being fine, but also just be aware of that, because it's hard to gauge, and it's hard when like you're a talker and you're anxious. Like, I talk a lot when I'm anxious, so I talked a little too much, and I talked over my recruiter a little bit, not on purpose, and she didn't mind at all. She never brought it up, but I think we both kind of were like very chatty, so it ended up working out fine. My next piece of advice is find ways to connect with your recruiter. They're going to try and connect with you. They're going to try and relate to you. My recruiter was also a mascot handler at some point, so we kind of bonded over our fellow mascot handler experience, and that also helped her understand. It was nice because it helped her understand what I did, and I didn't have to explain it in super major detail to her. And she also came from a big family and hadn't been to Disney World with her family. So there are just different ways to kind of like try and connect with them. And if they're trying to connect with you, let them connect with you. Have a good conversation, or at least try. Some people are too nervous to have casual conversations when they're in a super, super nerve-wracking environment. But try and let your recruiter connect with you, because it will help them. They're all about being personable and connecting with the people around you and being able to make magic for the people around you. So try and let them do that, because it will show that you're open to it. We already talked about this, but if there's something you're not sure about or something that's going to maybe set you back, emphasize the fact that you may want to use it as a learning experience, or emphasize why they shouldn't be worried about it. I did that with living situation. I was like, I'm not worried about myself going into the situation because it's an experience I've been looking forward to, and I'm going in with an open mind. But also I can see why you would be concerned. So like, acknowledge their concern, but also tell them what's going through your mind, because again, being honest in this situation a lot of times goes a long way. It really does. One of my last pieces of advice is to ask questions. Think about it. It shows you are listening. It shows that you're interested. I simply asked how long I had to accept my offer, and they told me. Really, any question works. Just ask a question. And also use your recruiter's name. I didn't really have any chance to use it naturally throughout our interview because I didn't want it to sound like I was going out of my way to use her name. But at the end of the interview, when she said thank you to me and used my name, I did the same thing back and said thank you for talking to me. I hope you have a wonderful day, blah, blah, blah. Of course, I inserted her name. Again, I'm not gonna out her name, but like, I used her name in saying goodbye. So I kind of showed that, yes, I remember your name. All right, so just little things I forgot to mention. My interview started at 3:12 and ended at 3:37. So it was around 25 minutes, which is the usual length. And yeah, it started just before my interview time. All right, so that is everything. I hope this was super, super helpful. I hope I answered all of your questions. If you have any other questions, you can pop them in the comments. I would be happy to respond to them. I'm looking forward to kind of documenting the whole process, and yeah, I'm super excited. It's a really cool experience, and I hope that whoever you are, if you are applying in the coming years, I hope that it goes super well for you. Bye, and have a wonderful day.